Doris returned home to find the scene of utter chaos. Her husband Philip lay dead, bludgeoned to death in their living room. Hello, true crime fans, and welcome to Behind the Yellow Tape. Today we're exploring a case that chills to the bone, not just for its brutality, but for the sheer audacity and almost unbelievable nature of the perpetrator's hiding place. We're talking about Theodore Edward Conis, also called the Denver Spider-Man. The story begins in Denver, Colorado in 1941. The world was on the brink of war, but in the quiet, tree-lined streets of the city, a different kind of terror was brewing. Philip and Doris Peters lived in a seemingly idyllic life in their comfortable home. Philip was a well-respected local figure, and Doris, his wife, managed their household. They were, by all accounts, a normal, happy couple. However, their peace was shattered on the night of the 17th of August 1941. Doris returned home to find the scene of utter chaos. Her husband Philip lay dead, bludgeoned to death in their living room. The house was ransacked, and it appears to be a burglary gone wrong. Police arrived, baffled by the lack of false entry and the peculiar state of the crime scene. There were signs of a struggle, but also an unsettling sense that the perpetrator had been intimately familiar with the house. Weeks turned into months, and the investigation stalled. The Peters home remained vacant, a grim reminder of the tragedy. But the story of the Peters house wasn't over. Neighbours reported strange occurrences, lights flickering in the empty house, sounds emanating from within, and even glimpses of a shadowy figure in the windows. Local children naturally spun tales of ghosts and haunted houses. The police, however, were less inclined to believe in the supernatural. They suspected a squatter, or someone returning to the scene of the crime. On the 30th of July 1942, almost a year after Philip had been murdered, officers decided to conduct a thorough search of the supposedly empty residence. What they found would shock the city and make headlines across the nation. As they meticulously went through the house, an officer noticed something peculiar about a small, unused attic crawl space. It was dusty, cobweb-laden, but there was a faint indentation in the dust, as if someone had recently passed through. With growing unease, they pushed open the small access panel, and there, huddled in the darkness, gaunt and dishevelled, was a man. His name was Theodore Edward Conis. He was a former drifter, an acquaintance of Philip Peters from years prior, and a petty criminal with a history of burglary. But how had he been living in the Peters house for nearly a year undetected? The truth was even more bizarre than anyone could have imagined. Conis had been living in the attic, surviving on scraps of food he'd pilfered from the kitchen, and using a hidden passage to move between the attic and various rooms in the house. He was essentially a human spider, scuttling through the walls and ceilings, observing the Peters' lives from above. On the night of the 17th of August 1941, Philip Peters had discovered Conis during one of his nocturnal scavenging trips. A confrontation ensued, leading to Philip's tragic death. Conis then continued his macabre existence in the house even after the murder, a silent, unseen spectre in the very home he had desecrated. Conis was swiftly arrested and confessed to the murder. He was eventually found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. The case of the Denver Spider-Man remains a chilling reminder of the hidden horrors that can exist in plain sight, and the psychological depths of those who choose to live in the shadows. Thank you for listening today, and remember, stay behind the yellow tape.